In my 23rd year, I stood at a new starting point in life. Fresh out of college, filled with hope and dreams, I embarked on my first job. This job required me to move to a brand new city, signifying a new beginning and many challenges, one of which was furnishing my new apartment on a limited budget. To save costs, I turned to Craigslist. This website offered a variety of items at reasonable prices, ideal for someone new to the workforce like me. Soon, I found an advertisement for a set of kitchenware at an exceptionally low price. These were exactly what I needed, and I thought this might be the perfect start to setting up my new home. The seller, who called himself John, told me in an email that he needed to clear out some items due to a recent move. Reviewing our email exchanges, John always seemed to respond quickly and efficiently to every question I had. In the emails, he detailed the brand and condition of the kitchenware, even attaching a few photos. The items looked well maintained, almost as good as new. John's willingness to sell at a price below market value made the deal particularly enticing, explaining that he was eager to move and hence willing to sell at a lower price. After exchanging a few emails, John suggested meeting in person for the transaction. He said his schedule was flexible and could accommodate mine. His easygoing attitude made me feel like I had found a good deal. We eventually agreed to meet on a weekend afternoon at his storage warehouse, which suited my schedule as well. However, as the meeting time approached, I began to feel a bit uneasy. I had never completed a transaction like this through Craigslist before, and warnings from friends echoed in my mind. For safety, I decided to inform a close friend about the details of the transaction beforehand, agreeing that if I didn't message them by a certain time, they should contact me. On the appointed day, I drove to John's provided address with some nervousness. Arriving at the warehouse in a secluded industrial area, the desolate surroundings made me shiver. The area seemed abandoned, with discarded containers and scattered building materials around. I stopped my car and observed the surroundings through the windshield. The sun, peeking through gaps in the clouds, cast mottled shadows on the dirty walls of the warehouse, making everything appear eerily quiet and desolate. I waited, internally debating whether I should leave. Just as I was about to drive away, an old truck appeared, slowly pulling up in front of the warehouse. I hesitated but ultimately decided to get out and see what was happening, thinking this might be John. However, when a burly man got out of the truck, I immediately realized he was nothing like the John I had imagined. He was tall and intimidating, with an indescribable coldness in his eyes. He walked straight towards me, wordlessly gesturing for me to follow him into the warehouse. Inside, the warehouse was dim and cluttered, with only a few beams of light streaming through the worn skylights, casting light on the dusty floor. The air was filled with the smell of mold and rust. Following the man through the warehouse, I saw only some worn-out kitchenware scattered in a corner, nothing like what John had described in his emails. I tried to question him, but the man's response frightened me. He suddenly turned around, his face showing a threatening expression, and harshly demanded that I leave immediately. At that moment, my fear peaked. I didn't dare say another word, quickly turning back to my car, my heart pounding as if it would jump out of my chest. Starting the car, I was almost trembling. I didn't dare to look back, only thinking about leaving that dreadful place as fast as possible. As I drove away, I saw through the rearview mirror the man standing at the warehouse entrance, watching me leave. His expression was cold and inscrutable, sending a chill down my spine. The entire drive home, I kept thinking about what had just happened. My mind couldn't settle, constantly pondering what this was all about. I began to realize that this experience was far more than just a regular Craigslist transaction. When I got home, I was almost shaking as I got out of the car. I immediately reported the incident to the police, describing my experience in detail. The investigation later revealed the shocking truth: the warehouse had been the scene of an unresolved theft case, and the man was a suspect the police were investigating. The so-called John was just a fabricated identity, and I had unknowingly become involved in an ongoing criminal case. This experience taught me a profound lesson about the potential risks in online transactions. It showed me how to protect myself and avoid danger in such situations. I became much more cautious and placed greater importance on my own safety. Every time I recall that desolate warehouse and the man's icy gaze, I can't help but feel a shiver. 2 years ago in winter, I decided to sell some of my used electronics on Craigslist. At that time, I was planning to upgrade my computer equipment, so I needed to clear out some old devices to gather enough funds to purchase new ones. I posted an advertisement on Craigslist, offering an old laptop and some related accessories for a total of $150. Although the laptop was a bit dated, it still performed well, and the accessories included a nearly new mouse and a durable backpack. Soon, I received a reply from someone named Alan who was very interested in my laptop and willing to pay the full price. His email looked professional, with clear grammar and polite greetings, which reassured me about the transaction. After a brief exchange of emails, we agreed to meet that evening at a popular cafe near my house. I preferred to trade in public places for a sense of security. The cafe was a familiar spot, often frequented by local artists and students, adorned with vibrant paintings on the walls, and filled with the rich aroma of coffee. At the agreed time, I walked into the cafe with the computer and its accessories. Alan was already there waiting for me, looking more nervous than he seemed in the emails, wearing a plain jacket and continuously scanning the surroundings. After we sat down, I showed him the laptop and accessories, and he inspected every detail meticulously. He seemed satisfied with the laptop's performance and appearance, nodding repeatedly. However, when I proposed to complete the transaction, he suddenly changed his mind, claiming his wallet had been stolen and he now only had $50. I was confused and disappointed, as he had previously agreed to the $150 price. I told him that price was unacceptable, and I'd rather cancel the deal. Alan became agitated, raising his voice, trying to persuade me to accept the lower price. At this point, other customers in the cafe started to notice us, and Alan, seemingly feeling the pressure, eventually left. I breathed a sigh of relief, planning to leave the cafe and head home. As I walked to the parking lot, I noticed Alan sitting in his car, watching me. His car was an old model sedan, looking somewhat run down. I quickened my pace and hurriedly drove away. On the road, I kept pondering the strange aspects of the transaction, filled with doubts. When I got home, I found an email from Alan in my inbox. He apologized in the email, saying he really needed the laptop but only had $50 at the time. He asked to meet again the next day, promising to bring the full amount. Despite feeling uneasy about his behavior, I eventually agreed to give him another chance. The next day, sunlight filtered through the mist, illuminating the city streets with a new day. I arrived at the cafe early and chose a window seat, allowing me to clearly see the outside. The cafe was buzzing with the smell of coffee and freshly baked bread, filled with a diverse crowd, students, writers, and several busy business people. The art paintings on the wall looked particularly vivid in the morning light. I ordered a hot coffee and a blueberry muffin, trying to relax. Every time someone entered or exited the door, I instinctively looked up. Finally, Alan appeared. He was dressed almost the same as the day before, looking around suspiciously. When Alan sat down, he didn't inspect the laptop like the previous day but immediately took out the money. I counted it carefully to ensure everything was correct and then handed him the laptop and accessories. After the transaction was completed, Alan glanced around and then hurriedly stood up, as if something urgent was pressing. He quickly passed through the cafe, almost rushing out the door. An elderly gentleman sitting next to me raised his head, his eyebrows furrowed, seemingly curious about the sudden movement. I stayed in the cafe for a while longer, filled with confusion and unease. I slowly finished my coffee, took a deep breath, and prepared to leave. As I stepped out of the cafe, the sunlight hit my face, but I felt a heavy shadow in my heart. I cautiously looked towards the parking lot, worried Alan might still be nearby. Fortunately, everything was calm, and I walked briskly to my car, deciding to leave the place as soon as possible. However, on the way home, I noticed a car following me. Worried it might be Alan, I didn't go straight home but instead took a few detours. I tried not to appear too nervous while staying alert. Eventually, the car stopped at a traffic light, and I took the opportunity to escape. After reaching home, I felt extremely uneasy. This experience taught me to be extra careful in any form of online transaction and to ensure safety is the most important thing.